my research, in late 1982, the federal government created something called the South Florida Task Force, where they really began to crack down on the cocaine trade in South Florida. And by definitely 84, Los Angeles had become the cocaine importation capital of the United States.
Which is true.
And that corresponded with an expansion of the gangs had been here, but they were in certain neighborhoods. They weren't covering every square inch of LA. They weren't going to every other city in America. But when you combine the gangs with the drugs, so they had more money to buy guns and etc., that caused an expansion of the gang. So tell me, is that true? And just tell me about that process.
Well, see, first of all, in 80, when you talk about 82 and what's going on in Florida, by the time it hit California, you know, it's, how could I say it? It was new, but it was old because, like, the generation before us was doing it big.
Tooties.
The Tooties, my father, Big Blue, Papa Blue, as you guys call him, Rolls Royce Shorty, Felix Mitchell, Doc Holliday, just like I said.
Ray Browning.
Ray was a youngster. Ray's more in my era.
Oh.
Okay, Ray, and like when you're talking about my father, when you're talking about Tootie, you're talking about Bigfoot Suge Raymond Wright. You're talking about Rolls Royce Shorty. You're talking about the Felix Mitchells. You're talking about the Ward brothers out from Detroit. When you're talking about the Frank Matthews and the Frank Lucases and all that, that was a generation before me.
Did you know who Frank Matthews was?
Yeah.
Did you see my documentary?
No.
I did a Frank Matthews documentary.
Really?
That's one of my big hits.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll send you the link.
It was a different era. So
you knew of nobody knows about him unless you were really into it.
But it's what people don't understand,
we didn't know if he was real when we started researching him because he's like unbelievable.
Right.
Oh, we verified. We interviewed the U.S. Marshals, the DEA,
right.
the federal prosecutor, everybody.
Right. Well, at that time, you're talking about the early 70s.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You talk about the late 60s to early 70s when these type of guys was trying to really, really, really bring blacks to a different level. We had clubs in the 70s. The blacks had clubs in LA. So
there was a consciousness amongst even the black criminals of this money is to economically empower the black community.
Right. So you had Lonnie Simmons, which was responsible for the Gap Band. Yarbrough and people. He come from Texas. He's opened up a Total Experience. My father was involved with a club called the Page Four, where all the big-time pimps and hustlers and whatever used to hang out at.
Where was that at?
That was right next to Blueberry Hill. If you're familiar with Blueberry Hill, if you saw the movie The Mac.
Well, what streets?
That was off Santa Barbara. It wasn't King Boulevard then. It was in Santa Barbara. It was right there on Santa Barbara between La Brea and Crenshaw. When you're talking about...
Oh, King Boulevard used to be called
Santa Barbara.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. King Boulevard used to be called Santa Barbara. And that was our strip between Crenshaw and La Brea when the blacks start converting from the east side all the way to the west. We had a famous club called the Parisian Room that used to be on the top of Washington and La Brea. Roscoe's and Chicken Waffle was created in a bar right there, a block east of La Brea and Washington, where that's basically where I grew up. Where my mom used to send me over to go get Roscoe, and I used to have to run through the bar, and then the guys in there used to pop me on my head and all that just to get to the back to get the chicken. So it's always been history. The black community always understood the economics about bringing more things into the black community. So when they say the 80s, like 82, what Florida was doing, all that was cool. But at the end of the day, we were kind of already there because one thing you got to understand, we're right at the border. So Tijuana, TJ, Mexico, we right there. So it was very easy for drugs to come in over there, easier than what they are now. So we always had that type of atmosphere over here. So what people's not really understanding is everybody, when you're talking about the East Coast gangsters and all that, they had to come to the West to get the drugs. They had to. You see what I'm saying? That's the only way that they did deals, because our prices, because we're so close to the border, our prices were cheaper. So they'll come here cheaper, and that's how they really became millionaires on where, you know, their respective cities and states.
So tell us, so now you've told us that there was already a huge underground going on. It just wasn't really on the public radar. But starting in the mid 80s, LA's gang scene and drug scene begins to, everyone realizes, oh, this is the new capital. What change did you see on the streets, and how were you involved in it?
Well, basically, you're talking about in the mid 80s, you're talking about we're the next generation. Okay, and when I say the next generation, is from the Frank Matthews and the Lucases and the Tooties and the Blues and the Rolls Royce Shorties, the Doc High. We're the next generation of that. So, like with every generation, it changes. You see what I'm saying? For us, the drug scenes was cheap. We found out how to make crack cocaine. You know, now we're on the corner. You have people that was very involved with the drugs, smoking crack, that was walking around with maybe $2,000 or $3,000 in their pockets. So you see that, you know, people wasn't being judged on, oh, you're a crackhead or anything like that because you had money. It was more of a flux of money that just came through, where it gave everyone the opportunity to make some money and do the right thing. It's always, you know, people can always make money. It's all about what you do with the money. And at that point, it got so bad in the black community because we was really killing ourselves and not realizing it, because we was too busy looking at the profits and the money. So from that point, you know, you had a lot of people that was above us, like Harry O, Michael Harris, which was basically a lot of cats in LA's mentor. And what I mean by that, he was born, you know, he was from the East Side, and, you know, he basically was raised in a prominent, you know, blood neighborhood. But what Mike always had, he had the entrepreneurship, you know, on anything. And so he always looked at the good in people and not the bad. So you wouldn't really consider him as a gang member. You would really consider him as a mentor, because he's a few years older than me. So everybody looked up to Mike, because he wasn't the type of person that tried to create drama. He'd try to stop it, and he'd try to be a ambassador, you know, against violence, and try to do the right thing and entrepreneurship. Start your own business. If you're going to do on the streets, you know, take the money and invest in a proper way. In the 80s, you know, what you were speaking of, you know, something real happened because of Mike. And that's when he did a play called Checkmates. And if you're familiar with Checkmates, you familiar? He was the one that basically, you know, discovered Denzel Washington. And from that, he was rubbing elbows with the political, you know, people at hand, with the Tom Bradleys and, you know, things like that. But we were making so much money at the time.
How much was a kilo? Oh, let me ask you this. So I'm doing this documentary called Cocaine Condor, which is about, it starts in the 50s, and it's about how U.S. political involvement supporting right-wing governments in South America culminated in the Contra cocaine scandal. So between 1982 and 84, the price of cocaine plummeted. And that was the same time when Congress wouldn't give money to the Contras, so Reagan told the CIA, let them send in cocaine as long as they give us money.
Okay,
so
but what do you consider plummeted? Because in the early 80s, kilos was going between 32 and 38.
But by the mid 80s, they were at 11
They were still
12.
No, they were still around that that number.
Well, at some point, because I mean, even in Detroit, they went down to 13.
Yeah, but see, that was like the late 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
From about 82 to about 87, the prices of cocaine was between 32 and 38,000 per kilo. But you were getting cocaine. You was getting 90% pure cocaine. When they figured it out where they can put whatever on it to cut the price, to drop the price, and turn back around and formulate rock cocaine, then it was a different element, because you didn't need that pure cocaine anymore. You can mix it with something to make rocks to get more. So in other words, they call it the double up. So you'll take a kilo of cocaine and make 2 or 3 kilos cocaine if you knew what you was doing and still had that pointance to it. So
Still get you high.
it still get you high. But the chemicals that was involved in the cut, that's what made you want it more and more and more and more. If the late 70s, early 80s, you talking about congressmen, you talking about a lot of high profile people could snort cocaine and they'll turn back around and eat everything in the house. You see what I'm saying? Now and back in the mid 80s when rock cocaine was created, now you start seeing people deteriorate. You see what I'm saying? They're smoking, then they need another hit and they won't eat for days. You see what I'm saying? So you can tell chemically.
Kind of stop ether from being readily available, and it seemed like the whole way cocaine was being made changed.
Right. Well, it changed because of the chemicals. You see what I'm saying? Like baking soda. I mean, you take baking soda, and if you took a kilo of cocaine, you realistically, right now, you can make a kilo and a half. You see what I'm saying? Because of the baking soda and the chemicals that's already in the cocaine. If people were doing anything, they always came in brick formations, but back in the 80s and the late 70s, they used to come like in a basketball. So when you open it up, when you crack that kilo open, it actually smelled like pineapples. Now, if you open up a kilo, it was straight cocaine. You see what I'm saying? So it smelled like pineapples. You open up a kilo of cocaine now, it smells like gasoline. You see what I'm saying? So that's the difference. So it's just like anything, pineapples to gasoline. So you see the change around that time.
Okay, let's talk about 2 things, and then we're going to go into the music. Tell us about Waterhead Bo, and you had that great story of when he showed up and how his importance to the scene, and because in terms of people who got convicted, he's the biggest. Now, that doesn't mean he was the biggest, but in terms of any case I read, in terms of volume, he
got caught when they caught Waterhead Bo.
Well, tell us that story, like how he came on the scene and all of that.
Well, see, basically,
in that nightclub story.
Yeah. Basically, Bo came from he's from the Valley. He's always been a cool kid. He played football. People knew him. He wasn't in the drug game heavy like that, but how he got into the drug game because he had his expertise on cars, and he used to fix cars up and things in that nature. And he had a car that he used to take to this car wash right there in Ventura, and Sepulveda, it's a real car wash, and that's where he met Mario. And Mario was interested in the car, invited Bo to his house after they agreed to sell the car to him, that Bo sold the car to him. And basically Mario opened the door like, here you go. Here go 100 kilos. From there, Bo came.
What year would this have been?
This would have been, this had to be 86, 85.
So
86.
things were already rocking.
Yeah, it was already rocking. But we wasn't doing it at a level is when Bo came in, because what Bo did, Mario gave Bo the opportunity to say, here you go. And Bo's whole thing, long as he made $1,000 or $2,000 profit, he was going to win. The thing with Bo, he knew everybody. So when everybody came together and said, oh shit, we can just get it from Bo, and then him and Harry O, Michael Harris, was tight. So their relationship, as it grew, Harry O was
kind of his conduit to the streets, or one of them.
Yes and no, because at the end of the day, Bo was a street cat, but he wasn't a street cat. He's a good cat. He was a good dude. He's a solid dude. But when you're talking about entrepreneurship and business minded, there's nobody on the streets like in our age that had that business savvy like Mike. Besides his brother, he had an older brother named Dave. Dave has, he died. But between Bo, it was a perfect marriage. It was a perfect storm with those two, because now Bo needed him and he needed Bo. So they realistically flood the streets with good prices where you was kind of forced, if you was in that game, to deal with them.
What was now at that point the prices had come down to like 13 or something?
No, the prices start coming down to 13 until the 90s. Yeah, you know, people say 13, 13.5, 12.5. No, that didn't happen until the 90s. You know, it was still high, but it had dropped because at the time, you got to understand, if Bo was getting them for 12.5.
Well, he was getting them, according to the indictment, he was getting them for 10.
Okay, so you say 10,000. Okay, so you're talking about an 80, was that 85, 86?
Well, at the end, 89.
Yeah, okay. So you're talking about around there, but that's when they caught him.
Yeah, that's when they caught him.
Yeah, you
see what I'm saying? Wiretap, he sold like 2,000 keys in 2 weeks on a one wiretap.
Yeah, but see, they had just got hip to Bo.
Yeah, right.
See,
right,
they got hip to Bo through Harry O.
Yeah.
That's how they got hip. Nobody, yeah, see, people don't understand that. They didn't really get hip to Bo until, you know, the incident that happened with Michael. You see what I'm saying? So that's before 89.
Tell us about Bo pulling up at the club when he got the first 100.
Well, when he got the first 100, he pulled up in the club. He flipped it back, and you know.
Well, he had him in the back of a truck.
Above his truck, he showed everybody, you know, hey, this is what I can do, and this is the price I can do them for. And you know, a lot, you know,
so
he was young.
He pulls up at a nightclub with 100 kilos.
Yeah, no problem. And you know, Bo, you know, we all looked at him like, wow. You see what I'm saying? But at the same time, you know, we was young. So, you know, everybody's mind was going through different scenarios, and Mike was the one that just said, you know what, hey, kick back, let's see what this is about. And that's how they really formed their relationship. You see what I'm saying? Where Mike was handling Michael Harris.
Oh, Michael Harris.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? But see, 89 is, you know, when he got caught, but you got to go back a few years back before that, because that's when Bo was, you know, just really getting in the game.
What was the incident you said with Harry O that led to everyone's downfall?
Well, what happened, okay, LA was structured like this. You had Compton cats, you had the East Side cats, you had the West Side cats, you had the Inglewood cats, you had different sections of LA where everybody was making money. And Harry O got so into with Mayor Tom Bradley and the whole, you know, political thing. We had action at having the Arco Towers, okay? And we had to come up with $10 million. And Harry O spoke to everybody in these divisions that was running their town, or their little areas, little sections of LA, and said, hey, we come up with $10 million, guess what? We can get an Arco Tower. And us being ignorant.
Me not being from LA, what's the Arco Tower?
Arco Towers, if you down there where you live at, there's a big old tower that says Arco on the top.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's the Arco Towers. We had action on
just a huge office building.
A huge office business, high rise, whatever. He said you come up with $10 million. They was gonna let us. We was making so much money. What Mayor Tom Bradley and Mike was trying to do was get us off the streets and get into real business. But we were so young and I wouldn't say ignorant, but
you're less than 30 at this point.
Yeah, we were still babies. You see what I'm saying? So what happened is we all said no and said, no, they're gonna wiretap us, they're gonna have this camera, they're gonna have that, and everybody pulled out. So you figure after that happened, that's when they served indictments on everybody in LA that was doing something. Was in the late 80s.
Oh, so do you think that was a setup, or?
It wasn't necessarily a setup. I think it was more of us being naive of what's going on, because we didn't understand where Tom Bradley and Michael Harris, they had a plan for the black community to do right.
So you think Tom Bradley knew what was going on?
Well, then he had to know. You see what I'm saying? You're talking about, we were making money. I mean, we were making a lot of money. You see what I'm saying? And I don't mean just we talking about a lot of money.
Tens of millions.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So you talking about each neighborhood, just like the neighborhood I grew up. We was making so much money. On the average, I was pulling in probably back then when I was doing it at least between 15 and 20,000 a night selling rocks.
Oh, so you're quadrupling your money.
Well, I'm quadrupling my money, but you got to understand it's all about location. It's just like in business. Location is very important. Now, in my neighborhood, the only thing that you have to do is come from Sunset Boulevard and drive straight down La Cienega and make a left and go maybe a half a block into
you're getting the Hollywood crowd.
I'm getting the Hollywood, I'm getting the celebrities, I'm getting everybody. So that money was constantly coming because nobody's going to come in, you know, go deep into Compton, go deep into Inglewood to get crack cocaine at the time. So we had the cream of the crop of people coming in. So what that did, that forced people from Compton, from Inglewood, everybody come get their cocaine from us because we was getting top-notch cocaine because we had to filter Hollywood with the best, not with the bullshit. So we always had the best cocaine. So when you have people from Compton coming in, you have people from Watts coming in, you have people from Inglewood coming in. They had to come to the West to get the real cocaine and get a good price. So at the time, Bo's in the Valley. You see what I'm saying? So he was getting the best of the best. So when it came to us, his first stop was us. You see what I'm saying? So when it came over here, we eating automatically. So it really forced the rest of these people to come from different areas of California, from LA, to come over there and get real cocaine at a good price, and everybody's happy.
From my research, there seems to be a big difference between the people that were in the gangs and the guys like you that were really making money, but at some point those things began to intertwine. Of course, you had to use the gang members to actually sell it. Tell us about that sort of milieu between the gangsters and the gang members.
Right. Well, see, the gang members, me personally, on how I feel about just that element that you're talking about.
Weren't a gang
never. I didn't have to. I don't claim no gangs. You know, to me, it doesn't make sense. You know, and, you know, I've raised my kids to think the same way. You know, we respect them, but we don't have to get involved with this. You see what I'm saying? They respect us, and, you know, we just don't have those, like, in me, I just never participated. I didn't have to. You see what I'm saying?
But you must have been selling them.
Well, I was selling it, but we was all, you know, like when people say gang members, you see what I'm saying? What is a gang member? What is it? Nobody could tell you what a gang member is. Somebody that just it's just like your neighborhood. Yeah. It's not you being a gang member because realistically, when you're talking about gangs, okay, each section or whatever gang you from, realistically, you only have. It depends how big your gang is, but if you take a big gang, okay, say for instance, if you took, who can I say? If you took
60s.
Any gang, okay, that has 100 plus gang members, you really only have 6 or 7 gunners. 6 or 7 gunners. And that means that these cats is going in work, putting in work. Okay, you don't have everybody, just because they carry a gun that they're a killer. I can give my nephew that's 6 years old a gun and say, hey, shoot him, and he's going to do it. That doesn't make him a gang member. You see what I mean? A
killer.
A killer. You see what I'm saying? So you have to pick and choose. Everybody's not killers. And that's where society thinks that gang. When you do in the 80s, you're talking about society worries about, just like right now, they say, these gang members are out of control. These are da-da-da-da. These are 80 babies. These are crack babies. So when you go into the element of a crack baby, so you have your 5-year-old son taking care of your 2-year-old daughter while the mother and father is out in the streets smoking crack. Okay? So you have a 5-year-old raising his sister, which is 2. This is real. You see what I'm saying? But you want to point the fingers at them, and they're not the problem. You see, the problem was crack cocaine. Just because you have tens and hundreds of thousands of black men in jail, you see what I'm saying, doesn't mean that they're bad people. I'm so sick of people saying, he went to jail, he's bad. And you have these type of people saying these things, but guess what? They can leave their driveway right now, go down the street, and get into a bad accident where somebody is killed. That's called a manslaughter.
Absolutely.
and you're going to prison for it.
Yep.
I don't care if you go for 1 day, for 5 days, but you're going to prison. Does that make that person a bad person? No.
It's life.
Yeah, it's part of life. And it's part of understanding people. Like when I was in prison, I used to talk to these youngsters and make them feel more, dude, you are somebody. People think when you go to prison in California, it's a life sentence, you're never coming home, and that's not true. If you get a 15 to life, yeah, you're going to do that 15 years before you start sentencing for life, for your life sentence. If you do that 15 years and you didn't get in no trouble and you programming, you get your education, you get your vocational skills, you get all that, I guarantee by the time you turn 18, you coming home because you've been programming. That's what it's about, programming. If you don't program, you're constantly fucking up. Guess what? You're not coming home. It's people in the California prison system that had a one life back in the 70s that's still in prison. People don't see that. People don't take the time out to really understand what's wrong with our what's wrong with our prison system. California is a cash cow for prison systems.
Union.
Well, it's just not that. Listen,
they're the ones who fought the repeal of the 3 strikes.
Yeah, well, they had to. But see, the whole thing, just like people don't understand that. But it's just like when I was in prison, I was a chairman. Okay, I was a MAC chairman. Okay.
What does that mean?
Okay, the MAC chairman was like, if other inmates had problems and stuff like that, they'll come to me, and I'll do.
You were in state, not federal.
I was in state, right? So when I went to the Fed too, but this. What it was is everything was on my shoulders. And the type of person that I was, I got along with whites. I got along with Mexicans. I got along with others. I got along with everybody. It wasn't like they knew they can come to me and I'm going to handle it because I got along with the staff. You see what I'm saying? I got along with the warden. I got along with the associate warden. So when things came, you see what I'm saying? They say, hey, the warden will say, where's Turner at? And I'm in the front of the captain say, hey, it's a riot about to happen. You know what's going on. We don't want to know what's going on. And can you handle it? And I find out what's going on. I say, man, leave that shit alone because it's taken away from us. Guess what? We go on lockdown. Guess what?
No visit.
My boy's not getting his visit. My boy ain't getting his family visit. Guess what? It's just a whole bunch. So my job was to keep it at a bare minimum. You see what I'm saying? When the big cell phone epidemic came, at the prison I was at, as soon as we hit the yard, when people going to work, we was being searched. And guess what? The inmates was coming to me because they don't want that relationship with the police, as they say. You see what I'm saying? So they're coming to me, Reg, man, we getting sweated, da-da-da-da-da. And they was because every time we'll leave, our hands against the wall, we getting patted down for cell phones. You see what I'm saying? So it became a problem. So guess what? I said, you know what? Let me go talk. So I go talk to the cap and say, listen, Cap, what do you want? And he says, there's too many cell phones. I said, what do you want? He said, just bring me some cell phones. I went and gathered. This is a true story. I gathered 15 cell phones. They were broke and handed it to him. And he said, cool. And that was it. Because guess what? Yeah, he said they stopped it.
He just got to show his superiors.
He has to show his superiors that we're doing something. You see what I'm saying? People don't understand that.
But if you make the inmates too uncomfortable, they become hard to manage.
Well, it's not about manage because it's hard to manage now because I don't know your age, but you're old enough where you got a 21-year-old kid telling you when you can shit and piss and get off your butt.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? That's just a whole...
When I was in jail, I was younger, so I couldn't imagine now having a high school graduate, 23-year-old...
Basically telling you what to do. So now you have adults, full-fledged... This dude could be my son. This can be my grandson. For some people, right? Hey, get on your bunk. Raise your hand when you can piss. You got me fucked up. So it's about, in life, it's never about the problem. It's always about the solution. You see what I'm saying? In my mind, how I work, it was always about the solution. You see what I'm saying? I don't give a fuck. People say, oh, the police, this, the police. We know we got bad police out there. But you know what's the funny thing is? Because you have some of the coldest killers and the coldest this and the coldest that gang members. As soon as their little car gets stolen, who are they calling? The police. You see what I'm saying? As soon as your homeboy gets shot, who the first person you calling? The police. When the police get there, what people don't understand, when the police do arrive on the scene of any crime, they have the opportunity to say, you know, fuck this shit. This ain't shit. Or let your little homeboy die. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, yeah, there are bad police. They are bad. They've been trained different. You see what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, if you look at the pressure that's put on police officers, and what I mean by that, look at the divorce rate of a police officer.
Suicide rate.
Yeah, the suicide rate. So it's something mentally going on in their minds when they become an officer. Period. Now, I dealt with a lot of correctional officers, and it was 3 of them that was super cool because they had their own program. They'd come in, they say, listen, we are all grown men out here. We're in here together. Okay, I got 8 hours here. We all grown. I know it's going to be some shit going on, and I'm with that. Only thing I ask you, I said, respect me. I'm going to respect you. You respect me as a man, I'm going to respect you as a man. You know, I know what's going on. If you guys need to discipline somebody, you take them in that fucking bathroom and you do what you need to do. Clean up the mess. I don't want no stabbing. I don't want you killing nobody. I don't want none of that. Okay? And don't make it an all-day thing. And I don't want people surrounding the bathroom trying to see who won the fight or what happened. You see, handle your business. It's over with. That's that. Program. You see what I'm saying? If I got to push this alarm, you motherfuckers going to be on your bunks.
We're all going to suffer.
You see what I'm saying? And that's just in dorm, you know, that's just in dorm living. In sales, it works a little different because we're locked up. You see what I'm saying? So people don't understand. You go from levels. So you start, it depends what person you are or whatever, but you start at 4, okay, which is reception. Then
you have to start at 4?
I started from Tehachapi to Centinela to CRC.
Is bad, isn't it?
Well, see, when people say that, you know, and it's just me, like, I never had no, like, when I was on, like, the time that I did, it wasn't hard. Not for me.
I only did 2 years, but I, like, barely had any fights.
Yeah.
I'm not a big guy.
Yeah.
People get themselves.
And, see, it's different with me because, like, I know how to get along. I know how to adapt. And a lot of people already knew me. So they kind of knew my temperament. You see what I'm saying? So when I got to the pen, you know, some of the biggest cats, hey, Reg, you know, I ain't seen in years. They made sure I was right. Everybody looked out for me because they know I'm going to return the favor once I get all my shit together. So I never got into no altercations like that. You see what I'm saying? I never...
The racial situation's pretty bad in there.
Well, the racial situation, because the only thing that you have in there, you have Hispanics and you have blacks. That's who's the big thing in there. You know, the white boys, they do what they want.
They have to be aligned kind of with the Southern Mexicans, right? Or
who? The whites? Yes. Sort of. But, and no, because you got the Northerns. The Northern Hispanics don't get along with the Southern.
Right. That's the big beef.
Yeah, you said that's they thing.
And the Northerns will fuck with the blacks, but the Southerners and the blacks.
No, right. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, it's a different, it's just like in the Feds, you got the DC boys and you got the Cali boys. And, you know, we got to kind of, you know, our heads is kind of screwed
Chicago,
up.
Detroit, New York.
Yeah, you got all that. But see, you got, when you got New York and all that, Detroit and Youngstown, they run more with the DC boys.
Oh.
Yeah,
but I know for a fact because people told me DC and Detroit get into it too.
They get into it too, but it's just like Crips and Crips getting into it.
Yeah.
But when the get down, you know, it's DC and it's Cali. If they smash, you talking about that's the East Coast.
Yeah.
So that's the East Coast. So you really say East Coast and Cali, West Coast. That's what you're looking at.
So it's kind of an East Coast, West Coast beef in federal prison.
If it went to that.
It usually doesn't.
Pardon me?
It rarely does.
It rarely does.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
One more drug question, then we're going to go into the music business.
Right.
So probably around 1990-ish, as you have Manuel Noriega falls, Pablo Escobar's killed, the nature of the cocaine and drug business in general changes where the Mexican cartels start to become more important and the deal with the Colombians change. And so the Colombians don't want to be in America anymore. So they don't need to have like these black lieutenants like in Detroit and LA that they're saying, hey, here's 1,000 kilos, sell them for us. The Mexicans, But there's enough Mexicans in America, they can just send it to their own cousin in Chicago.
But see, what people are not understanding.
Did you notice a change?
Like for me, it wasn't never a change. See, because society's looking at it from Colombia, Peru, and things like that. What you got to understand, in order for them to get it to the United States, it was always a Mexican mafia cartel. Always. You see what I'm saying? They were just so low key where you're talking about Peru. You're talking about Colombia. Okay. Once they do what they need to do, guess where it's coming? In order for it to get over the border, you have to come through Mexico. You see what I'm saying? So it came from the Mexican cartel being the middleman until just being the shit. At the end of the day, they were always the shit. But everybody looked at them as the middleman when you're talking about the manufacturing costs and everything that was going on in Peru and Colombia.
So I've noticed now, or from reading DEA stuff and knowing what I know what goes on in the street, because Mexico is a source country for heroin, marijuana, and meth, they focus on sending that in because they're making it and growing it. Their profit margin.
But they always have. That's what people are not getting. You're taking like Nori and those type of people that you're speaking of. You're talking about people that run countries. Okay, so you're taking let's go to Colombia for a minute. Yeah, shit's cheaper. You got the poppy fields, you got everything, right? They do what they do, right? But when it gets to Mexico, they're the middleman. So the Mexico says, okay, we getting it for 1,000 per se, so we can sell it to the U.S. for 5,000. You see what I'm saying? What people don't understand, it's like in any business, the best business to have is what?
Retail.
The distribution.
Oh, distribution, yeah. Supplying the retail.
That's it. So that was always Mexico's thing. When Noriega and them was, it stopped what was going up there, and the Mexico said, fuck it, we could do it our fucking self. So that price margin that they was having from Peru and Colombia, they don't need them no more because we can do it ourselves, and it's right here, and we can do just as much and get it over to the States just as fast.
It seems like in the 90s there became, and definitely now into the 2000s and 2010s, less really big black dealers and more Hispanic.
Okay, why? Because if you look at it, just like I told you, in the late 80s, well, the mid 80s to early 90s, they took everybody off the streets. They took all the blacks off the streets. And what I mean by that, they served the indictments to the Bo Bandits and everybody that was running their territory. We was all in jail. So once they took us off the streets, that's when things came out. Then, certain people couldn't mess with certain people. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you look at it now, you got there's some cats out there that's telling for real. And I don't mean telling on some shit. They telling some real shit. You see what I'm saying? And that's something that I never had to get involved with because I know where I'm from. You see what I'm saying? I know my peoples. You see what I'm saying? Me telling is a big thing because their skeletons, I can open up some shit. And I stay away. That's one of the reasons why I stay away from LA because I know who's telling. You see what I'm saying? You
don't even want to bump into them.
Well, it's not about bumping into them because it's not my business. They didn't tell on me, but it's not my business. You kind of say if it's not my business, I'm not involved. Long as my kids are cool and everything that I love is cool, I'm probably the most humblest guy out there. I don't get in people's bullshit. Everybody's trying to put themselves in a position where telling's cool and it's not. Telling's telling. If it's not your business, what you telling for? That's just like me giving you a kilo of dope. You get caught, and who you gonna tell on? Why are you telling on me? You got caught. Why are you telling? Everything I've been to prison for, telling them. There's millions of people I can tell them.
Yeah, but you could have not done a day.
I didn't have. Yeah. I said, why should I take out the little 11 years that they took, or 12 years they took up out my life? I could have told and didn't have to do a day in prison. But I chose not to because guess what? First, I'm a man. You see what I'm saying? And I knew the game because I was laced with the game. A lot of these cats pretend like they was laced with the game, but they get up under that pressure. You see what I'm saying? Then they ready to tell because the only thing they thinking about is pussy and money. Not knowing this.
What if I told you that the illegal drug business wouldn't be possible without the American government?
Treason against the American people committed by Central Intelligence.
For a meeting with the CIA, and you will have your indictment dismissed in federal court.
The U.S. government cut deals and bestowed favors on brutal dictators, malevolent generals, and murderous gangsters in every corner of the globe.
You're getting emotional again.
You might think it was just a conspiracy theory. You'd be wrong.
Drugs were in the black community. Nobody really cared.
All the heroin was coming from Italian sources, Jewish too.
The African American community has quite a debt to what we would consider criminal enterprise.
You know, only poor people got the time to make moral judgment.
This is black organized crime.
Yes, yes.
You might think that Timothy Leary's quote to tune in, turn on, and drop out with LSD was meant to change America.
Do you have the feeling of reality when you look at this paper and you hold the pencil in your hand? No. Yes.
But what if LSD was really part of a secret U.S. government mind control program? Turns out that it was.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement of the 1960s.
Early '65, I decided that I really wanted to make a lot of LSD and give it away.
International drug trafficking was subordinate to the national security interests of the United States.
American Dope. For the first time, the real story of the global drug trade, told by the undercover agents, kingpins, and prosecutors who were there at the very heart of darkness.